The first time Emma walked through the iron gates of Ashwood Academy, she felt an eerie chill crawl down her spine. The boarding school sat atop a hill in rural Vermont, shrouded by a dense forest that whispered secrets with every gust of wind. Its brick facade was proud and historic, but something about the place, something just behind the polished windows, made her stomach twist in knots. Emma had always been a rational girl. Nothing fazed her easily, but even she couldn't shake the feeling that the school was watching her. Every creak in the floorboards, every rustle in the ancient oak trees outside seemed too deliberate, as if the school itself were alive, waiting. Her roommate Lila appeared from the shadows of the corridor. Lila's dark hair hung in loose waves around her face, and her green eyes seemed to dart toward corners that Emma couldn't see. "First time here?" Lila asked, her voice soft but deliberate. Emma nodded. "Yeah, it's bigger than I thought. Bigger." Lila's laugh was low, almost a whisper. "You haven't seen anything yet. You'll find out soon that Ashwood has stories." "Stories?" Emma tilted her head. Lila's expression darkened. "Things happen here. Things that make you question whether you're awake or asleep." Before Emma could ask more, a bell rang, echoing through the empty halls like a cold, metallic warning. Dinner. The dining hall smelled faintly of burnt bread and something metallic, like iron, in the air. Emma's appetite shriveled. She noticed the other girls kept to themselves, eyes flicking toward the ceiling, the corners of the room, always just beyond her line of sight. Every so often, she thought she saw shadows that weren't her own. That night, after lights out, Emma lay in her bed staring at the cracked ceiling. Outside her window, the wind howled through the pines, and the branches scraped like fingernails across glass. Sleep wouldn't come. Then she heard it, a soft tapping, from the attic. At first, she thought it was the old building settling, but the taps continued, rhythmic, deliberate, like someone walking across the floor above her, stopping at intervals, then moving closer. Emma's pulse quickened. The attic was supposed to be locked. No students were allowed. And yet, the tapping grew, louder, more urgent. She pulled the covers around her shoulders, trying to convince herself she was imagining it. A whisper followed. "Emma." Her eyes snapped open. The room was empty. The only light was the pale moon slanting through the window. Her heart pounded so hard she feared it might betray her presence to whoever or whatever was up there. The next morning, Emma tried to speak to Lila about it. "Did you hear anything last night?" Lila's face went pale. I don't want to talk about it." Emma's unease deepened. By the time breakfast rolled around, she felt trapped, suffocated by the history and secrets of Ashwood. She tried to focus on her classes, the lectures about literature and biology, but every hallway echoed with whispers she couldn't identify. Every shadow seemed to stretch too far, watching. Later that week, Emma noticed each room 503, the attic, above the 5th floor, was always locked. Except tonight, she swore she could hear something scratching behind the door. Something waiting, and she wasn't sure she could resist looking, because at Ashwood, the walls remember, the shadows remember, and some doors, once opened, never close again. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and orange. Emma lingered in the library, pretending to study, but her eyes kept wandering toward the staircase that led to the 5th floor. She had tried to ignore the scratching, the whispering that haunted her nights, but tonight, it was impossible. Lila had left hours ago, citing a late study session. Emma was alone, and the silence of the hallways pressed in on her like a physical weight. Every footstep, every groan of the old building seemed amplified in the stillness. Emma's curiosity overpowered her fear. She walked toward the staircase, each step creaking under her weight. The 5th floor landing smelled of dust, mildew, and something else, something metallic, almost like blood. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she approached the heavy wooden door at the end of the hall. Room 503. It was locked, as always, but tonight, something was different. The lock rattled slightly, as if someone or something was on the other side, trying to get out. "Hello?" she whispered. The door remained silent. Then a soft thud echoed from above, like a footstep. Emma froze. Her pulse raced. Her hand hovered over the doorknob. Something scratched against the wood from the other side, slow, deliberate, insistent. Emma's stomach twisted. She had to know. She had to see. Using the small metal pin she had found on the floor earlier in the day, she worked on the lock. Her hands shook so badly, she thought she might drop it. After what felt like an eternity, she heard a click. The door swung open with a groan. Cold air rushed out, smelling of decay, dust, and something fouler she couldn't identify. She peered inside. The attic was empty, or so it seemed. Moonlight streamed through a small circular window, illuminating stacks of abandoned furniture, tattered curtains, and piles of old books. Everything was coated in a thick layer of dust, untouched for years. Emma stepped inside, her heart hammering. The air was heavy, suffocating, charged with an unnatural energy. Her flashlight flickered as she moved further into the room. Then she saw a diary, lying open on a rotting wooden table. Its pages were yellowed, brittle with age. The writing was jagged, frantic. The last entry was dated exactly 5 years ago, the same date she had heard whispered in her nightmares. "They are coming. The shadows follow me. I hear them calling my name. I can't escape. If anyone reads this, don't go to the attic. They wait." Emma swallowed hard. The hairs on her arms stood on end. She heard it again, the scratching, the whispering, louder this time. Closer then, a soft, chilling voice echoed behind her. "Emma." She spun around. The room was empty. Only the shadows danced on the walls, stretching unnaturally as if alive. Emma backed toward the door, but it slammed shut before she could reach it. The whispering grew louder, overlapping, filling the room with a cacophony of voices. Some called her name, others moaned in pain. Emma's flashlight flickered, then died. Darkness swallowed her, and then she saw the eyes, two glowing, milky white eyes floating in the shadows, staring directly at her. They didn't blink, they didn't move, but Emma could feel them piercing her soul. Her scream caught in her throat as the temperature dropped. Frost formed on the window, creeping toward her like icy fingers. The diary flapped open, pages flipping, wildly, despite the lack of wind. Words she couldn't read appeared in a language she didn't know, glowing faintly, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. And in that moment, Emma knew whatever had been trapped in this attic was not human. It was waiting. Then, as if pulled by some unseen force, she felt herself moving forward, toward the shadows, toward the eyes. She struggled, screamed, tried to fight, but her body was no longer hers. A hand, cold, invisible, pressing on her shoulder, forced her down. She hit the floor with a thud, gasping for air. The eyes blinked, and she saw movement, a figure, tall and thin, pale, and impossibly still, its face hidden in darkness. "Welcome," it whispered, a voice that sounded like wind through dead leaves. "You've come, at last." Emma's vision blurred, the room spinning. She tried to crawl away, but the attic itself seemed to shift beneath her, walls bending, shadows twisting. She realized, with a terror that froze her blood, that this room had been waiting for her all along, and now there was no way out. Emma's breathing echoed in the small attic, each inhale ragged, each exhale trembling with fear. The pale eyes remained fixed on her, unblinking, unyielding. She tried to stand, to run, to make sense of the impossible, but her limbs felt heavy, as if the air itself were trying to hold her down. Then she heard it, a soft whisper, almost like a chant. It came from the corner, where shadows pooled like spilled ink. The voice wasn't human. It was distorted, layered, and yet unmistakably calling her name, Emma. Emma. Her flashlight, which had died seconds ago, flickered back to life, but the light revealed nothing solid, only movement, shapes shifting too quickly to comprehend. Figures formed from darkness, pale and contorted, their mouths opening in silent screams. The attic walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting like lungs. Emma's heart pounded so violently it hurt. She stumbled backward, bumping into the table with the diary. It flipped open once more, and the words glowed brighter than before. She could now read them clearly. Do not trust the living. They are the shadow's servants. They feed, and they wait. Escape is not yours. You belong to Ashwood now. A cold wind whipped through the room, and the glowing eyes moved closer. Emma felt a pressure in her chest, a force that pressed down, forcing her to the floor. She tried to crawl toward the door, but the attic had changed. The door was no longer at the far end. It had vanished, replaced by an endless wall of darkness. Panic surged. She screamed for Lila, Lila. Her voice bounced off invisible walls, swallowed by the shadows. There was no answer. Then, from the far corner, a sound she didn't expect. A soft, giggling laugh. Emma. This time it was a familiar voice, Lila's voice, but it wasn't right. Hollow, distant, stretched in a way that made Emma's blood run cold. Slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows. Lila wore what looked like Lila stood there, her eyes blank, her face pale, almost translucent. Lila, Emma croaked. What? What's happening? The figure tilted her head, her lips curling into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You shouldn't have come here, she whispered. Now, you can't leave. Emma scrambled backward, tripping over a chair. The shadows thickened, forming shapes that pressed against her. The attic seemed alive, breathing, pulsing with hunger. The glowing eyes followed her every move, never blinking, never turning away. Then a door creaked open behind the shadow Lila. Emma froze. A corridor appeared, lined with mirrors that reflected endless versions of herself, versions with hollow eyes, twisted expressions, and mouths open in silent screams. Her reflection reached out, as if trying to pull her in. Emma's legs gave out. She fell to her knees, hands shaking as she stared at the mirrors. Something moved behind hers, something fast, something cold, brushing against her shoulder. She turned, but there was nothing. Only the shadows, only the whispers, only the soft, horrifying laughter that seemed to come from all directions. Her chest tightened. She tried to breathe, tried to think, and then she remembered the diary. She lunged for it, clinging to it, as if it were a lifeline. The words seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heart. She read aloud, trembling. The shadows obey the fear. Show no fear, or be consumed. Emma's mind screamed, in disbelief. Could she control them with her fear? She swallowed, tried to steady her breath, and stood. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her chin, staring into the glowing eyes. They flinched. The shadow Lila screamed not with sound, but with the way the darkness warped and shook. Emma felt a surge of courage, fragile but real. She took a step forward, another. The shadows recoiled slightly, hissing like boiling water, but then a new sound echoed, footsteps above. The ceiling groaned, and from the attic hatch, a figure descended. It was tall, thin, wearing the same uniform the missing girl from 5 years ago had worn in her last photograph. Her hair was tangled, her face streaked with shadows, and her eyes glowed just like the others. Emma froze. The shadow Lila advanced again. The figure from above raised a hand. A whisper, barely audible, but louder than anything else. Run, if you can. Emma didn't hesitate. She sprinted, weaving between the mirrors, the shadows recoiling as she passed. She didn't look back. She didn't stop. She could hear the laughter, the whispers, the hiss of shadows clawing at the air. But she kept running. At the far end of the attic, A faint light glowed. It was the exit, or maybe a trap? Her instincts screamed to reach it. Emma dove through the light, and suddenly she was no longer in the attic. She was back in her room. The moonlight streamed through the window. Lila was asleep in her bed, completely normal. The diary lay on the floor, closed, as if nothing had happened. Emma's body shook uncontrollably. She wanted to scream, but no sound came. She wanted to move, but she stayed frozen, staring at the floor, praying it was just a nightmare. But deep down, she knew the truth. Ashwood Academy wasn't just a school, it was a prison, in the shadows. They hadn't forgotten her. The morning, sunlight felt cruel. Emma couldn't shake the cold dread that lingered even with the warmth of the sun streaming through her window. She stared at the diary on the floor, its cover cracked and worn, as if it had been waiting for her all this time. Lila was calm, normal, almost too normal. She hummed softly while packing her books for class, unaware or pretending to be of what had happened in the attic. Emma's stomach twisted. She wanted to tell her everything, but the words caught in her throat. How could she explain shadows that moved, whispers that called your name, and glowing eyes that weren't human? Determined to find answers, Emma left the room early. She had to know the truth about the missing girl. 5 years ago, a student named Allison Parker had vanished from Ashwood Academy. The official story said she ran away, but rumors told a darker tale. She had been trapped, or worse, consumed by the same shadows Emma had encountered. Emma started in the library, combing through old yearbooks and school records. The more she read, the more she realized how carefully the school had hidden Allison's story. Notes had been removed, pictures erased, and all mentions of the attic were buried under layers of bureaucratic nonsense. But one photograph caught her eye. Allison, smiling, standing in front of the 5th floor door. Something in her gaze sent a shiver down Emma's spine. There was fear in her eyes, a knowing terror that seemed to stretch across time. That evening, Emma tried talking to Lila again. "Do you know anything about the attic?" she asked, her voice low, tense. Lila froze, her eyes flicking toward the ceiling. "Emma, I told you, it's better if we don't talk about it." "But last night," Emma began, but Lila cut her off. "You have no idea what you're messing with," Lila whispered. "Ashwood doesn't forgive curiosity. That girl, Allison, she didn't survive." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, Lila? You're scaring me." "I'm telling you the truth," Lila said, her voice trembling now. "I've heard stories from older students. Allison was different after she went to the attic, and then she disappeared." Before Emma could ask more, a distant sound reached them, a soft, deliberate tapping from above. Both girls froze. The attic hatch was supposed to be locked. Supposed to be. Emma swallowed hard. "It's back," she whispered. The tapping grew louder, echoing through the hallways, irregular but deliberate. Something wanted their attention. Emma and Lila exchanged a terrified glance. Lila grabbed Emma's hand, urging her down the hall. "Run," she said. But the attic had other plans. The shadows had been disturbed, and they were growing restless. As Emma sprinted, she caught glimpses of movement at the edge of her vision, pale figures darting just beyond the light, whispering her name. By the time they reached the main staircase, the school seemed different. Hallways twisted and impossible. Angles, doors appeared where none should exist, and the shadows thickened, crawling along the walls. The floor beneath them groaned like an old creature, disturbed from sleep. Suddenly, a scream echoed from the 5th floor, high-pitched, desperate, unmistakably human. Emma's blood ran cold. She didn't recognize the voice. It wasn't Lila's, but it was close, very close. "Emma." The shadows lunged from the walls, forcing the girls back. Emma stumbled, crashing into a statue of the school's founder. Dust and cobwebs filled her lungs, but she pushed forward, adrenaline overriding terror. At the landing, they saw her. A girl in a school uniform, pale as moonlight, hair matted and hanging across her face. Her eyes were wide, glowing faintly. "Help me," she whispered. Emma froze. She knew that voice, Allison Parker. But before Emma could react, the girl's eyes snapped completely white. The shadows around her surged like water, rushing toward Emma and Lila with impossible speed. The air grew thick, heavy, suffocating. They ran down corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The shadows followed, whispering, taunting, promising pain, promising fear. Each door they tried to open slammed shut before they could reach it, and then Emma realized the worst truth. Ashwood Academy had never been a school for girls. Not really. It was a trap. A feeding ground for something ancient, something patient, and Allison had only been the beginning. Emma's lungs burned as she and Lila darted through the endless corridors. Every turn seemed wrong, hallways stretching longer than they should, doors appearing where they hadn't been before. The whispers of the shadows followed them, echoing through the school with cruel intent. "Where do we go?" Emma gasped, clutching the diary. "No idea," Lila whispered, panic in her voice. "The shadows, they control this place. It's like Ashwood itself is alive." Emma tried to steady her breathing. The diary pulsed faintly in her hand, glowing in the dim light of the hallway. She realized the words weren't just written, they were alive. The pages trembled as if guiding her. "We have to go back," Emma said, her voice trembling. "Back to the attic." Lila froze. "Are you insane? That's where Allison, she's the key," Emma interrupted. "The diary said the shadows obey fear. If we face it, maybe we can stop it." Lila looked at her, eyes wide, torn between terror and trust. After a long pause, she nodded reluctantly. The fifth-floor landing stretched before them like a nightmare. The attic hatch loomed above, its edges darkened, pulsing as if it were breathing. Emma climbed the stairs, Lila close behind. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, impossible to ignore. The hatch groaned as they pushed it open. Cold air rushed out, carrying a metallic, iron-like smell. Inside, the attic had changed. It was no longer cluttered with abandoned furniture. Instead, shadows pooled across the floor like living water, and walls seemed to ripple. The pale eyes of Allison's spirit watched from the corner. "Emma." Allison's voice was faint, almost pleading. "You shouldn't have come back." Emma stepped forward. "We need answers. Why are you here? What happened to you?" The figure shifted, becoming more solid, more terrifying. Her eyes glowed white, her mouth stretched in a silent scream, and then she spoke not in words, but in images, flashing in Emma's mind. The shadows, a circle of students trapped years ago, whispers calling them to the attic, the darkness, consuming them one by one. The attic. It's a gateway, Emma realized aloud, a doorway to something else. Suddenly, the shadows surged. They surged from every corner, clawing at the girls with icy fingers. Emma raised the diary. The words glowed brighter, pulsating in rhythm with her heartbeat. She read aloud, "Face the fear. Do not let it take you. Only light reveals the path." A beam of moonlight filtered through the circular window, illuminating the shadows. They hissed, recoiled, but did not retreat completely. Allison's spirit moved toward Emma, hand outstretched. "Take my hand," Allison whispered. "It's the only way." Emma hesitated. Fear screamed inside her, but she knew. She had no choice. She reached out, and as soon as their hands touched, the shadows erupted, shrieking, swirling violently around them. The attic warped, walls bending, the floor trembling beneath them. Emma felt herself being pulled through a vortex of darkness, visions flashing before her eyes, students trapped in endless hallways, screaming silently, shadowy figures consuming everything, doors that opened to nowhere. Then, suddenly, they were somewhere else. A massive chamber, dark and cavernous, filled with shadows stretching endlessly. The ceiling disappeared into blackness. In the center, a glowing portal pulsed, almost alive, feeding on the fear of those trapped within the school. Emma gasped. This is the source. Lila clung to her arm, trembling. We can't. How do we stop it? Allison's spirit hovered between them and the portal. You must confront it, or it will consume Ashwood. Every soul trapped here. Every student. She hesitated. It's waiting for fear. It feeds on it. Emma's chest tightened. The shadows were closing in again, whispering promises of pain, of death, of endless torment. She gripped the diary, feeling the glowing words pulse like a heartbeat. She realized then that this wasn't just a battle of courage, it was a battle of will. You can do this, Allison whispered. Face it. Don't let it take you. Emma took a deep breath. The attic floor quaked, the shadows surging. She raised her voice, reading aloud the diary's words with every ounce of courage she had. I will not fear. I will not give you power. I am stronger than you. The shadows shrieked, recoiling violently. The portal flickered, pulsing wildly, as if enraged. Emma could feel its hunger, its malevolence, but she stood her ground. Lila joined her, repeating the words, and together they forced the darkness back. But even as the shadows retreated, a new, deeper fear began to stir. Something ancient, far older than the school, stirred within the portal. Something that had been waiting. Emma realized with horror. This was only the beginning. The portal pulsed like a heartbeat, filling the cavernous chamber with a sickly green light that warped the shadows around it. Emma's hands shook as she gripped the diary, its pages glowing brighter than ever. Lila's breath came in ragged gasps, eyes wide with terror, as the whispers of the shadows swirled around them. This is bigger than we thought, Lila whispered. Emma nodded, swallowing hard. It's not just the shadows. This thing, it's alive, and it's hungry. Allison floated between them and the portal, her pale glow casting faint light across the darkness. It's older than Ashwood. It's always been here, feeding, waiting for fear. The attic is just a doorway, a key for it to enter our world. A deep, guttural growl echoed from the portal. The shadows recoiled, but the growl grew louder, vibrating through the floor and into Emma's chest. Shapes formed within the swirling, darkness figures, taller than humans, impossibly thin, their faces featureless voids. Tentacles of shadow reached toward them, writhing like snakes. Emma stumbled backward. We can't fight it, she said, her voice trembling. We're not strong enough. You are, Allison said firmly. But you have to face your fear. You can't just run. It feeds on that. The shadows hissed, closing in again. Emma felt panic clawing at her mind, the urge to run, to hide, to surrender to the darkness. But she held the diary tight, focusing on the glowing words. Slowly, she read aloud. I am not afraid. I will not give you power. You will not consume me. The shadows recoiled violently. The entity in the portal pulsed, thrashing with rage. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Lila joined Emma, repeating the mantra, her voice stronger now. We are stronger than fear. You will not control us. The portal shrieked, a sound that was both a scream and a vibration that rattled their bones. The entity inside the darkness began to take shape, a massive figure, towering, with limbs stretching impossibly long. Its face was a void, but hundreds of faint, glowing eyes appeared across its body, watching, analyzing, judging. You see it, Allison whispered. The true form. That is what feeds on Ashwood. That is what trapped Allison, and many before her. The entity moved closer, tendrils of shadow curling around the edges of the chamber. Emma felt the pull, like gravity, drawing her toward it. Lila grabbed her arm. We can do this together, she shouted, fear and determination clashing in her voice. Emma nodded. She raised the diary higher. We are not afraid. The shadows screamed and lunged, but the words of the diary burned like fire through the darkness. The entity recoiled, howling with rage, its tendrils flailing. The chamber shook violently. Stones cracked, dust rained from the ceiling, and the air grew thick with a choking darkness. Suddenly, Allison darted toward the portal, her ghostly form diving into the swirling mass of shadows. She let out a scream high, piercing and the portal flickered violently. A massive shockwave of light and shadow erupted, pushing Emma and Lila to the ground. When the dust settled, the entity had pulled back, retreating into the portal, which flickered like dying embers. The shadows shrank and scattered, retreating to the corners of the chamber. The attic itself seemed to breathe, pulsing slowly, ominously. Emma sat up, chest heaving, staring at the now dim portal. Lila knelt beside her, shaking. Did we do it? Emma shook her head. No, we only held it back. For now, that thing isn't gone. It's waiting, learning, and if we're not careful. A cold wind swept through the chamber. A whisper, faint but clear, drifted across the air. Next time, there will be no escape. Emma and Lila exchanged a terrified glance. They had survived the first encounter. But the entity had made one thing clear. Ashwood Academy was not just haunted, it was alive, and it was hungry. The attic was quiet now, but the silence was suffocating. Emma and Lila sat huddled together, their minds racing. The portal had receded, but they could still feel its presence, like a heartbeat beneath the floorboards. We can't just wait, Lila whispered, voice trembling. It's going to come back. Emma nodded. We need to know what we're dealing with. Allison, she didn't survive, but she left clues. The diary, the portal. Something in the school's history must explain all of this. The two girls returned to the library, combing through every scrap of old records, yearbooks, and faculty notes they could find. Hours passed, and slowly, a terrifying picture emerged. Ashwood Academy wasn't always a school. It had been built on the ruins of a private estate, one that belonged to a man named Elias Crow, a wealthy and cruel figure obsessed with the occult. According to the earliest records, Crow had performed rituals in the mansion's attic, attempting to open a gateway to the other side, a world inhabited by beings that fed on fear. The estate burned down in 1923, under mysterious circumstances. Most of the students and staff had been killed or worse, disappeared. The school had been built atop the ruins, and some faculty apparently knew of Crow's experiments. Emma shivered. It's been feeding for almost 100 years, and now we're in its path. Lila's face went pale. That's why the shadows are everywhere. It's not just a ghost, it's a predator. And Ashwood is its hunting ground. As they pieced the history together, Emma noticed a recurring pattern. Each disappearance happened exactly on the night of the winter solstice. Allison's vanishing, 5 years ago, had occurred on December 21st. And now, the solstice was only 3 days away. We have to stop it before the solstice, Emma said, determination hardening her voice. If it succeeds, Ashwood will never let anyone leave alive again. Lila nodded. Her fear now mingled with resolve. But how? We've seen what it can do. That portal. It's not something we can just destroy. Emma flipped through the diary again, and her eyes widened. A passage she had missed glowed faintly. The entity fears the light of truth. It feeds on fear, yes, but lies give it strength. Show it the truth, the names of the lost, the wrongs done, and it will falter. Emma's heart raced. We need to find every record, every name of the students who disappeared. We have to expose the truth, bring it into the light. That's how we fight it. Lila swallowed hard. You mean, call out every victim? Let the entity know we see them. Yes, Emma said firmly. Everyone. We face it with knowledge, not fear. That's how we survive. The two girls began gathering names, dates, and details from dusty archives and old newspaper clippings. As they worked, strange things began happening. Whispers echoed in the library. Shadows flickered across the walls, and the temperature dropped with every page they read. And then, a soft knock on the library door froze them. Emma's blood ran cold. "Who's there?" she whispered. No answer. Only the sound of footsteps approaching, slow, deliberate, echoing through the empty hall. Before they could react, the lights flickered and went out. The shadows surged, more aggressive than before. A chilling voice whispered from the darkness, "You cannot stop me. I am Ashwood. I am fear. You belong to me." Emma and Lila clutched each other, hearts racing. The entity was testing them, probing for weakness. But now, they had a plan, a way to fight back. And as the shadows closed in, Emma whispered to Lila, "We face it together. No fear, remember that." The shadows paused for a moment, almost as if they could sense the determination. But the entity wasn't finished yet. Its hunger was patient, ancient, and merciless. The winter solstice was coming, and when it arrived, Ashwood Academy would demand its price. The night of the winter solstice arrived with a bitter wind that cut through the academy like a knife. Emma and Lila stood in the attic once more, the diary clutched tightly in Emma's trembling hands. The shadows had grown restless all day, creeping along the hallways, watching them, whispering threats. "This is it," Emma said, her voice low but firm. "We call out the names, expose the truth, and face the entity. No fear, that's the only way." Lila nodded, gripping a small lantern. The light flickered, but it seemed to hold back the shadows from approaching too close. I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, her voice shaking. Emma placed a hand on her shoulder. "We have to. For everyone who's gone, for Ashwood itself. We can't let it win." The attic hatch groaned as if echoing their determination. A cold wind swept in, carrying whispers, screams, and laughter from the portal. The shadows pooled across the floor, rising like black waves, writhing, clawing. Then, the portal pulsed, violently, growing larger, swirling with a darkness that seemed to breathe. And from it emerged the entity, the same massive, featureless figure from before, its eyes glowing faintly across its body. Its presence pressed against their minds, urging them to flee, to surrender. Emma steadied herself, opening the diary. The pages glowed with the names of students who had disappeared over the decades. "We start with the first," she said. "Call out the names, show it, we see them." Lila swallowed hard, voice trembling but resolute. "Clara Morton, Samuel, Griggs, Allison Parker." The entity hissed, tendrils of shadow lashing out toward them, but they recoiled as if burned by the lantern's light. Emma continued, her voice growing stronger with each name. "Elias Crow, Margaret Hale, Catherine Winters. We see you. We know your story. You will not be forgotten." The shadows shrieked, twisting violently, writhing as the light of truth cut through them. The entity roared, not a sound, but a vibration that rattled their bones. Its tendrils struck at them, but Emma and Lila stood their ground, chanting names, exposing decades of lies and tragedies. Suddenly, Allison's spirit appeared, hovering between the girls and the entity. "Keep going," she shouted. "You're breaking its hold. Don't stop." The portal pulsed again, violently this time, and the attic walls seemed to stretch and twist as if the entire building were alive. Shadows lashed, but Emma and Lila refused to look away, refusing to yield to fear. Then, a scream erupted, not from the shadows, but from inside the portal itself. The entity writhed, its form flickering, faltering, its tendrils thrashed, and the shadows scattered. Shrieking in anger, Emma and Lila's voices grew louder, steadier, stronger. Every name, every truth revealed, struck like a weapon against the darkness. And then, silence. The portal began to collapse inward, shrinking, pulling the shadows back into its void. The entity's form dissolved, leaving only a whisper on the wind, You cannot destroy me. Only delay the inevitable." The attic fell silent. The shadows, gone. The diary's glow faded. Emma and Lila collapsed to the floor, gasping, shaking from exhaustion and relief. Allison's spirit appeared one last time, smiling softly. "You've done it. For now, but the entity will return. It is patient. It always waits. You've given it a delay, not a defeat." Emma's hands shook as she closed the diary. "Then we prepare. We learn. Next time, we need to be ready." Lila nodded Ashwood. "It's never going to let us leave in peace, is it?" Emma shook her head, her gaze hardening. "No, but now we know its weakness. We've seen its fear, and next time, we will be ready." The winter solstice night passed, but the air still felt heavy, thick with the memory of the entity. Emma and Lila emerged from the attic at dawn, knowing the battle was far from over. Ashwood Academy had been confronted, but its hunger remained, and somewhere, deep in the shadows, the entity waited. The days after the solstice passed in a fragile, uneasy silence. Emma and Lila tried to return to normal, attending classes, eating in the cafeteria, pretending to their peers that nothing had changed. But Ashwood Academy felt different now, alive in ways they couldn't ignore. Shadows seemed deeper, corners darker, and whispers threaded through the hallways at night. It started subtly. Books flew off shelves when Emma entered a room. Doors slammed shut behind Lila, trapping her for minutes that felt like hours. Cold fingers brushed against their necks when no one else was around. Then came the dreams. Emma would wake screaming, visions of the entity bending the school, stretching corridors into impossible angles, students trapped in shadows, screaming silently. Lila saw it too, visions of Allison, screaming to be free, calling out warnings that only Emma and Lila could hear. One evening, as they studied in the library, the lights flickered violently. Shadows pooled along the walls and floor. The entity had returned, but stronger. Its form seeped from the darkness, tendrils lashing outward, searching, testing. Emma grabbed the diary. "It's learning. It's adapting. Whatever we did during the solstice, it didn't destroy it. It just made it angrier." Lila swallowed hard. "We need another plan. But what can possibly fight that thing?" Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the fifth-floor hallway. Emma and Lila froze. Figures pale, faceless, and writhing shadows slithered along the walls, reaching out with clawed tendrils. Students screamed in the distance. Though no one was there to see the attacks, Emma realized with horror the entity was feeding again, pulling fear from the living, growing stronger. "Allison," Emma called out. "What do we do?" A flicker of her spirit appeared. "There's a way, but it's dangerous. The source of its power isn't just the portal, it's the fear, the lies, the hidden truths. You have to expose everything, even the secrets the school keeps from you. Only the full truth can weaken it enough to fight it." Emma and Lila exchanged glances, understanding the magnitude of what they had to do. They began investigating the school's archives, uncovering decades of secrets, disappearances, cover-ups, occult experiments by past head. Every student who vanished, every accident, every tragedy. It all tied back to Ashwood and the entity feeding through fear. That night, the shadows came for them directly. The lights went out, and the temperature dropped to freezing. The whispers turned into screams. Doors slammed, trapping them in the hallway. Tendrils of darkness lashed out, catching at their clothes, their hair, their skin. Emma read aloud from the diary, names and truths of students past and present. The shadows shrieked, retreating temporarily, but the entity itself appeared at the center of the hallway, massive, looming eyes glowing in the dark. Its voice was everywhere, inside their heads, vibrating through their bones. "You cannot stop me. I am fear. I am Ashwood. I will consume everything." Lila's lantern flickered, and in that dim light, Emma saw the entity's form changing. Its tentacles were twisting into shapes of the girl's classmates, their faces screaming in agony, reaching out. Emma realized then that the entity could manipulate fear into physical forms, using their own minds against them. "We have to stay focused," she shouted. "We cannot give it fear. Remember Allison's words." Together, they chanted names, truths, and exposed every secret they could find, forcing the entity to retreat inch by inch. But each attack left them drained, and the entity was patient. It was learning, evolving, waiting for the moment when their courage faltered. As dawn approached, Emma and Lila collapsed against the wall, trembling and exhausted. The shadows had withdrawn, but they knew the entity's patience was infinite. Ashwood had already tasted their fear. It would return, stronger, smarter, and more deadly. And somewhere deep inside the fifth-floor attic, the portal pulsed faintly, a constant reminder that the entity was still waiting, always ready to strike. The attic hatch loomed above Emma and Lila, like a dark maw. The winter morning was silent, the usual sounds of the school muted, as if Ashwood itself was holding its breath. Every hallway, every shadow, seemed to whisper warnings. Turn back. You cannot win. But Emma and Lila had no choice. They had gathered every piece of truth, every name, every hidden atrocity the school had tried to bury. They knew now that this was the only way to fight the entity, once and for all. "We can do this," Emma whispered, gripping the diary. Its pages glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. "We call out everything, no fear, no hesitation. Everything Ashwood has hidden, everything it's fed on. We expose it now." Lila nodded, lantern shaking in her hands. "Together," she said. They climbed the stairs to the fifth-floor attic. The shadows greeted them immediately, thick and writhing, whispering in voices that sounded like all the missing students combined. The portal pulsed at the center, larger than ever, black tendrils reaching out like fingers seeking prey. The entity emerged from the portal, immense, featureless, hundreds of glowing eyes scanning them. Its presence pressed against their minds, threatening to crush their courage. "You cannot stop me," it boomed inside their heads. "Fear is my domain. Ashwood is mine." Emma took a deep breath. No more hiding. No more fear. She raised the diary high, reading aloud with every ounce of determination she had. "We see you. We know your lies. We know your victims. You feed on fear, but we will not give it to you. We remember every soul you took, and we expose you." Now, Lila joined her, holding the lantern high. "We will not be afraid. Every secret, every hidden crime, every lost student, we bring them into the light." The shadows hissed, screeching violently, but the diary's light cut through them. The entity howled, its tendrils thrashing wildly. Then it did something Emma didn't expect. It shifted, forming shapes of the students it had claimed over the decades. Their faces screamed silently, their eyes hollow. Emma and Lila could feel their terror, but they held firm, chanting names and truths. Suddenly, the attic seemed to collapse inward, bending reality. Emma realized the entity's final tactic. It was trying to trap them inside their own fear, creating illusions, twisting the space, warping time. Lila gasped. It's trying to break us." Emma's voice trembled, but she kept going, reading the diary, naming every student, every secret. "We see you. We know what you are. You will not control us. You will not consume Ashwood." The entity shrieked, a sound that rattled bones, and lashed out with every tendril. The shadows recoiled as if in pain. The portal pulsed violently. Then, in a blinding flash of light, the attic was filled with the faces of all the students the entity had consumed, their eyes staring back at Emma and Lila. No longer trapped in fear, but empowered by truth, the entity writhed, screaming inside, their minds, its form flickering, dissolving, the shadows retreating into nothingness. Emma and Lila felt the attic shift again, the portals shrinking, twisting, and then silence. They collapsed, gasping, shaking. The diary's glow faded. The attic was quiet, empty, the shadows gone. Ashwood Academy felt still peaceful, almost innocent. Allison's spirit appeared one last time, smiling. "You did it," she whispered. "The entity is gone, for now. But Ashwood is patient. Remember this, courage, truth, and light will always fight fear. Guard them well." Emma and Lila nodded, understanding that the school had been tamed, but not destroyed. They had survived the nightmare, but the lessons of Ashwood would remain forever. As they descended the stairs, the morning sun broke through the windows, lighting the hallways in a way it never had before. For the first time, Ashwood Academy seemed like a school, not a feeding ground, but deep within the shadows of the fifth-floor attic. A faint pulse remained a reminder that some darkness, no matter how defeated, never truly dies. Emma squeezed Lila's hand. "We survived," she whispered. "For now," Lila replied, glancing at the attic hatch one last time. And with that, the two girls walked into the sunlight, leaving the horrors of Ashwood behind, at least until the next time the darkness awakened.